Hi, everyone, and welcome on this new episode of Product with Panache. I'm super excited today to be welcoming Sophia from Saiga. She's the head of product at this digital personal assistant company based in Berlin. I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Solène. Hi, Solène. How's it going?
Hi, Axel. I'm good. How are you?
Good, all good. Really excited about tonight's episode, especially because this is the first time we're going to be talking to somebody based in Germany, and really excited also to hear a little bit about Germany's startup scene. So,
Yeah.
without further ado, I'm going to bring Sophia on, and yeah, let's welcome her. Hi,
Hey,
Sophia.
Axel.
Hi,
Hey,
Sophia.
Celine.
How's it going?
Nice to be talking with you.
Good. How are you?
Good, good,
Great.
good. So you're based in Berlin, right?
Yes, exactly.
Hey, great stuff. Um, we wanted to bring you on the show today because I was looking for articles about product discovery on Medium, and I just landed on this article that you wrote over the past year, and I thought this is interesting. It was an interesting take on product discovery and how to make it work with delivery and how you guys were setting this up in the very early days at Saiga. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Sophia. I'm going to ask her if you want to come on the show. And yeah, now you're here. So we're super happy for you to be here with us. So basically, tell us a little bit about you. Like, what has been your journey so far in product discovery? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about Saiga.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. So yeah, currently I'm leading product management at Saiga, which is a very, very early stage startup. We just launched our personal assistant service that is basically powered by a combination of human and artificial intelligence. We're still a small team of 14 people, 10 of them working in the product design and engineering team. And yeah, it's this exciting pre-product market fit where a lot of things are happening every day. And prior to Saiga, I held a position as a head of product at Bubble, a language learning company. So for all those of you who might not know it, it's a quite established company here in Germany and Berlin, with a product that is out there on the market, I think, for 10 years, with millions of users using it every day. Yet the teams that I was leading, they were not working on the core product, but were focused on bringing in new language learning experience to the Bubble portfolio. So it was a bit like working
Very
in a
cool.
startup within a bigger grown up, trying to run a little faster than the rest of the organization, experimenting a lot with things we could bring into the app, but also things that could live outside the app to make the whole experience a bit more ubiquitous. And in my very first job, I helped to build up a high-tech startup called Navis in Munich, where we built some robots that you push around the building to scan it, and then a virtual reality software to walk through the building and measure things out, attach additional information. And also here I joined very early on when we were still 10 people sitting in the university. And then I was there for the whole roller coaster ride of growing a startup to, I think, around 200 people. And
Amazing.
there I wasn't just focused on product, but I was leading a customer experience department, so a mixture of some service team, a product team, user research, program management. And I think this time taught me a lot about the importance of service design and how important it is that product teams and service teams really work together super closely and kind of design all the touch points that customers have with the company to make sure they really tell a compelling story. That was a cool time. I think in general, I've done a lot of very early stage product and service work. To me, this is always the most exciting phase, to go from 0 to 1 to build something that doesn't exist yet. So that's it about me, I guess.
Super
That's really
interesting.
interesting.
Thank you for sharing that. Maybe back on Saiga, I'd be interested to know and to understand a bit better what kind of challenging you're trying to address as a business, and also what type of users you're aiming to help, basically.
Yeah, sure. So we want to address the problems that people and society face with life admin. And with life admin, we mean all these small, sometimes big administrative tasks that it needs to run a life, a household, sometimes a whole family. So this can really be anything from canceling and setting up a new electricity contract, applying for a visa, paying a bill, scheduling a doctor's appointment. So these, yeah, all these things that a lot of people do late in the evening or at the weekend. And yeah, we think there's two problems with that. From the perspective of society, we believe that life admin is really a factor that leads to a lot of inequality. So the less privileged you are as a person, the more severe the consequences of you not managing your life very well. So if you don't earn a lot and then you forget to pay a bill and you have to pay a fee, that's not great. If you're applying for certain benefits and you don't really know how to fill out this application and then you don't get the benefits granted, that's really not cool. So we believe that by building a system that eventually reaches everyone, we can hopefully at least contribute a tiny bit to decreasing the social equality. And yeah, so that's a bit like the bigger perspective, our big mission. But then from the perspective of a user, I think doing these little admin tasks is not really fun. Like most of the time, they're not really rewarding. They rather protect the downside, but often don't directly offer any reward. So they basically steal your time that you probably rather would spend with your kids, with your friends, following your hobbies. And therefore, this is kind of the functional problem we're trying to solve, just giving people more time. But there is also quite a big emotional component to it. So in our research, for example, a lot of people told us that they're super organized in their work life, but then they're very embarrassed about how chaotic their private life is. You know, they forget to pay something, they procrastinate their taxes. So just last weekend, I had 3 friends telling me like, "Oh no, sorry, we can't meet on Sunday. I have to do my taxes." It was the last day in the year when you can hand in your tax declaration. And
Always the
yeah, and
last
then
day, always the last day.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, for me as well. I'm super organized at work, always prepared for meetings, following up on everything. And then my partner is complaining about our private lives. Like, how could you not have
There's
booked these
also
train
this,
tickets? And
there's also this thing about your kind of like mental or cognitive load, right? I think if you're
yeah,
using all this energy to try and be organized in the workplace, then maybe when you get home, you just want to relax and disconnect. And I don't
yeah.
know that a lot of us can have this superpower of investing this much energy both in the professional and personal life to just keep all the plates
Yeah.
spinning.
Yeah, totally. At some point, yeah, you don't want to take any more decisions. You just want to relax and stop working. And it's a bit like having a second job, right? Like on the side somehow. So yeah, this problem of procrastination, this kind of mental load, kind of always keeping track of what needs doing when, and also the fact that a lot of people told us that they just sometimes feel stupid doing these things. It's like, oh, I have a master degree from a well-known university and I don't know how to declare my taxes, for example. That's not a great feeling. And yeah, and the founder of Saiga, Karl Moritz, he moved back a couple of years ago from the UK to Germany with his French wife and his 3 kids, and kind of moving a whole household to a new country. He realized like how much effort it is and how draining it was for him. And therefore, he was like, okay, why can't we build something that helps me and a lot of other people with that at some point to make sure, yeah, you save time, but you also just feel less stressed, more organized, and more on top of things. So yeah, that's little bit the founding story, the problem that we're tackling. And yeah, the way how we're trying to solve that is by offering this personal assistant service, which basically consists of 3 things. A team of real human assistants that take up tasks for you and therefore save you time. And then a mobile app that you can use to communicate with us, to hand over tasks, but also a app that becomes more and more proactive and suggests you things so that you don't have to keep track of all these things you have to do. And last but not least, we're building a kind of back office tool, a kind of CRM system that our assistants can use to work on these tasks that are coming in, to communicate with our users. And here we're bringing in more and more automation and machine learning to make sure this service at one point is not so kind of human heavy and is something that can be offered at a more affordable price to everyone.
And interesting that you're talking about the functional aspects, but also the emotional ones. I'm curious to understand, also you're talking about underprivileged people and then like busy workers that might be different personas. I'm super interested in understanding how you've been discovering all these aspects of your users to get to know them better.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did a ton of user research at the beginning. Before building the product, we talked to a lot of people. We asked them to show us their physical folders where they have things stored in, to kind of guide us through a couple of scenarios where they're taking care of things, show us their to-do lists that they're using to manage their life. And well, we knew that we really wanted to build something for everyone eventually, but we also knew that for a startup, it's super hard to kind of build something that fits to everyone right from the start. Right. So we were like, okay, we need to find kind of a small target group to get started with. And what we did, we were like, okay, who has the biggest pain points? And we were like, probably parents of young kids, because they just have a lot of things to do. They have to manage their kids' life too. And expats, because they come to a new country, they don't know the system, often don't speak the language. So we thought these were two good groups to get started with. But luckily, we did a little proto-testing type. We basically offered our service via WhatsApp. So not having built any product, not having written any code, we just have a WhatsApp service where people could reach out to us and hand tasks over via WhatsApp. And it was quite interesting that we figured out that being a parent and being an expat was not really the decisive criterion to become a power user of the service. But that those people who really used the service a lot turned out to be people that had a very busy job, and most of the time also were in a management position. So they knew how to delegate things. They were very used to kind of hand things over. They used a lot of services also in other parts of their life. And they were also like willing to pay a premium solution. So we really moved from, okay, we want to reach everyone, we need to focus on a specific target group, this is probably the right target group, to, oh no, it's not, we're now focusing on these busy managers. But yeah, obviously we still have in mind that at some point we want to broaden that, and therefore we're trying to build up a brand that somehow accommodates for this.
Yeah, super interesting.
That's really interesting. And so you were talking a little bit about how you started with essentially just setting up a WhatsApp service, right, where people could reach out to you. I think that's really interesting. How did you go about setting this up? Like, what was the thinking behind saying, maybe this MVP of an MVP is just a WhatsApp group or WhatsApp contact, right? How does that work?
Yeah, so we wanted to, we had a couple of hypotheses on, the cornerstones of the product, but we also had a lot of question marks. We weren't sure, like, should we really build a product that covers everything in life admin, or should we maybe build a vertical solution that only focuses on, I don't know, scheduling appointments with third parties, for example. So we thought, like, okay, what's the best way of figuring this out? And then we thought, okay, actually, it's very easy. You can offer a service like that without having a app for this. We have a way to communicate with people via WhatsApp. So yeah, I think that was great because we basically set it up within 2 days, pushed it out. We didn't prepare it a lot. We didn't think about, okay, what happens if a task is coming in, who's taking care of it? We build it along the way after we launched it. But I think we could really, prove and also disprove a lot of hypotheses. So yeah, this thing with the user group is one example. Then we also thought like, oh yeah, this chat function, this is something we need to offer now via WhatsApp because this is a chat service, but in the app we don't want to have that because it's hard to automate something where people can send free text messages. But in the end, everyone told us, this is the greatest thing about this service, that I can just kind of send you a voice message, a text, I can just drop things. I don't have to click through, oh, this is the task I want to hand over. So yeah, it was very revealing. I can just, if someone has the chance to build this no-code prototype before building the real product, I think it's very worthwhile doing that.
Pretty cool. I really like this also because there's this idea of time to value, right? So your ability to maybe use another existing service to validate or invalidate some of your hypotheses maybe gets you faster to delivering value for your end users. So that's also a really interesting idea. So I also want to jump on some of the stuff you mentioned. So you said you joined the company at an early stage, and I guess now you're at a different step in the journey. I'm really interested to know, how has the product practice, so the craft itself, the way you do product, the workflows, processes, the way you're building the app and the experience today, how have these things changed? And what are some of the things you were doing before that you're no longer doing, and what are some of the new things you're trying to set up in your product practice?
Cool. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in general, I'm always thinking in terms of product lifecycle in three main phases. There is this kind of pre-product phase where you basically, it's pure discovery work, right? Like usually you're not writing a lot of code, it's more like prototyping, a lot of interviews, just trying to understand the problem you want to solve a little better and define the cornerstones of your product. Then this phase where you're like, okay, cool, this seems to be like something that could work, and then you build it and you launch it and you kind of very quickly iterate up on it to find product market fit. And then there's this kind of last stage where you're just kind of optimizing, where you're just very focused on processes. You have big teams and need to make sure everyone works together. And and I think with Saiga, we went kind of through this pre-product phase, and we're now in this, okay, we just launched the product 6 weeks ago, and now trying to iterate on it. And I think in this pre-product phase, we used a lot of discovery tools, let's say, or methods, like user interviews. We did a lot of card sorting with people, showed them paper prototypes, did this WhatsApp service. But we didn't really have a clear rhythm there. We didn't have concrete kind of ceremonies for doing discovery, and there wasn't like any delivery yet. Because things kind of change on a daily basis. You shouldn't think about processes because you barely know what kind of product you want to build, right? And I think what I found very helpful in this phase is that really everyone from the product design and engineering phase was involved in prototyping. Kind of our head of engineering was answering a lot of the tasks that were coming in, and that was super helpful because we now have much more empathy for our operations team who's now kind of running the service. And and I think the other thing that helped us a lot in this phase was that we kind of clearly defined what are the touch points we want to have with users along kind of testing the prototype. We wanted to send out this specific customer survey. We wanted to invite some of the power users to our office to talk with them in a group setting. So I think before we launched this prototype, we had a very clear plan of how and when to get feedback from users, but there wasn't much more around discovery structures or processes. And and now that we are in this kind of pre-product market fit phase where we actually started building, I think this is this kind of exciting phase where you need to think about, okay, how do we basically build. Do we work in Scrum or Kanban? So you have to set up this. You have to think about what are kind of these typical delivery ceremonies that you set up. And I think this was the first thing we tried to do, to kind of make sure, okay, we're getting these delivery structures right, and discovery was still kind of very fluid and kind of ad hoc. And once we had kind of figured out a way of, okay, this is how we do refinement sessions and our planning, Scrum planning sessions, once we felt, okay, we have some stability in here, this is when we then thought a bit more about, okay, how exactly do we want to do discovery? Do we have some kind of standard sessions where we get together to talk about it? How do we make sure that we involve everyone in discovery, but also not too much, so engineers still have enough time to kind of write some code? And yeah, I think this is the phase we're now in. We have kind of set up a couple of standardized ceremonies for discovery. We are in the process of defining different, we call them product artifacts, or tools that we work with on a weekly base to kind of make the right product decisions, like setting up strategy slides, an opportunity map, building out a customer insights dashboard, all these things. So this is where we're at the moment.
That sounds really interesting. It sounds like you guys are mobilizing and you're trying to find your pace, which is always exciting. Before handing over to Sulen, I think one of the things I'm also interested in, right, is to get a sense of how you guys are structured today in the product team, or maybe in the wider organization in general. Because if I'm not mistaken, you're still a relatively small team, right?
Yeah, we're 14 people in total, so tiny.
So in these 14 people, you have designers, product managers. How is the team organized?
Yeah, so we have this kind of product design and engineering team. Now, the second team we're currently building out is our operations team, so the people that basically run the service. And now we're also hiring for marketing. But we really started out with product design and engineering because we were like, okay, at the beginning, we need to define the product. And here at the moment, it's basically one squad. So we have one PM, one our lead designer, and I think at the moment 5 engineers. And since yesterday, actually, also a QA engineer, and then our head of engineering and myself. And I think the way how we're trying to work is that there are people who are driving discovery. So this is mainly our PM, Marie, our designer, our head of engineering, and myself. We're trying to kind of involve the rest of the engineering time here and there where needed, try to make sure they're kind of in the loop and know kind of what is going on and can provide input and feedback where needed. But yeah, this is kind of this product trio, or in our case, like 4 people, because I'm also still quite involved in there, that is driving discovery, and everyone else is somehow obviously involved in the delivery process as well. And I think now for us, kind of the biggest challenge is how exactly do we involve our operations team, because they are kind of part of this product unit, right? Because our service is this combination of like people interacting with you via our app and using this back office tool. So this is something we're still experimenting with. I mean, they have more than enough to do, but they also need to know what is going on in the product. We need to basically sit next to them and understand where the problems are. Sometimes kind of being an operator ourselves to kind of make sure we understand why some things on their sides are not going so well, because we're just not facilitating them well via our product. So this is something where we're still experimenting in how far we should consider them as stakeholders, or rather part of kind of this wider product unit. Yeah.
Super interesting. And actually on this one, I'm wondering, how do you maybe prioritize between your internal users, like operational stakeholders, and your end users? Like, because I guess when you're building the product, you have those 2 components that you need to take care of.
Yeah, good question, and that's super difficult. I think at the beginning we were fully focused on the end user, because we were like, if we can if we have kind of a super efficient thing in the background, but no one is using it, then like our back office processes don't mind. And therefore, I think we spent a couple of weeks or rather months purely focused on making sure we are offering a smooth app experience. And now is the time where we realized, okay, the feedback at the beginning when we launched was not great. People were like, oh, this is weird, and like, why that? And the app is too slow. And I think that was good, because it shows that we launched early enough to get all this valuable feedback, and then we acted up on it. And now the feedback is super positive, and people are like, wow, it's great. It feels very smooth. And this is now the time when we started to shift a little bit and are now much more focused on, okay, how can we make things easier for our operations team, but also we started to build out this robot process automation platform where more and more automation is coming in. And I think in the future we're now kind of hiring for a second squad, where we're kind of breaking out into two teams, and then probably have a stronger focus on this kind of automation and making things more efficient and building a great and smooth user experience.
Yeah, and also because you want to offer both tech and human touch, it's almost like your end user satisfaction depends on your internal users kind of satisfaction. So ricochet.
Yeah, totally. We always, like, if we say like, okay, this is a feature we're building like indirectly for our end users, but it's kind of for the operators. But in the end, whatever we do in the background will lead to a higher quality resolution of a task that you're handing in, or kind of a faster resolution of the task you're handing in. Yeah, so they are pretty entangled.
Yeah, I guess. I wanted to be back on what you just said before, like that you had built all those product artifacts to help you in discovery. And maybe two things, see with you if we could actually see them, or if you could share some of them with us, because we're big fans of practical things. And also, I was curious to know, because you were involved several times at very early stage phases in companies, how did you make your discovery practice evolve during those different experiences? And how did you come up with these artifacts that you're using today? Like, did you iterate on them? And how did that happen?
Cool. Yes, so I'm just thinking about where to get started. So I think in general, kind of these artifacts is something I remember when I was working at Bubble. Our CPO once came and was like, what are kind of the core artifacts that we need to make sure that we have in place? And then we kind of got together in the product leadership round and kind of collected our ideas. And I think this was, for me, this moment where I thought like, oh yeah, there are really a couple of core things that everyone should have in place. And then I kind of in my personal wiki just kind of noted down these things. And when I now kind of joined Saiga, I was like, okay, where to get started? What is the thing we most urgently need? And I think I always start with like, okay, the most important thing is probably kind of having a product strategy somehow, and kind of building this strategic deck, and then thinking about, okay, from the strategy, how do you basically then break things down to, in terms of prioritizing what you do, to like, okay, the planning the sprint and having the product backlog, what are the different steps here in between, and then making sure that kind of you start on the top, and also iterate from, okay, product strategy, this is probably then the most important thing, because it defines everything else we do. And not making sure you have the best backlog in place and a super well thought through system here, but no clear strategy, really working your way and iterating up on them backwardsly. And and I can show you a couple of these artifacts if you want. Let me. Cool. So Axel, if you want to pull up
Yeah, sure thing.
the screen. Yeah, here we go. I think this is one of the main artifacts we're currently working at, and this is our opportunity tree or our opportunity map. And so it lists all the different opportunities we see to improve our product for our users or for our operations team. And it's filled based on kind of input from two other artifacts, our strategy slides, and also a user feedback or user insights database that we've built up in. It's basically just a table in Notion where we're kind of putting in all the feedback we get by interacting with users directly, from feedback calls, by ideas we have internally in the team. And then we kind of go through kind of the strategy deck or through these user insights from time to time and see, okay, is there anything new emerging, any new opportunity that we have? And then we try to put it here on this map. And the way how kind of we build up this map is we have 4 success criteria up here in purple, where we say the whole experience with our app needs to be super easy. It needs to be a low barrier to enter a task here. We need to make sure people are very engaged. We need to make sure that we bring in automation and make our work more efficient to build a scalable product. And the way how we solve things for people are of high quality, and we can really solve them end to end. So this is our 4 success criteria. And then all the opportunities we have, we try to see, okay, where do they fit? Are they helping us to increase the engagement of our users, or do they help us to make sure we're kind of solving things for people in a higher quality? And then we put these opportunities here. We try to make sure we really formulate them as an opportunity, as a how might we question. If we already have some ideas for solutions, we place them down here. And then we have here the different lines where we say, how many people would we reach with this? What would be the impact on the user or on the operator or on the business value? How much effort would it be? And how big is our confidence? So I think nothing super crazy. I think this is a tool many people work with. And then down here we have open discovery questions. And then the way how we work with this is that on a fairly regular basis, I think now we're on a kind of 3 weeks frequency. We look into this with everyone involved, the head of engineering, our design lead, our product manager, our founder, and go through it and are like, okay, is there a new opportunity? If yes, how would we evaluate it? And then we see and highlight things in pink where we say, okay, this is an opportunity we should focus on next and spend some time on. So yeah, I think this is quite helpful for us, at least at the moment. The moment we decide, okay, we want to spend some time on this opportunity and figure out if it's really worthwhile solving it, then we started to adapt a framework that that I found on a blog post by a PM from Miro, which I found really nice. It's a product alignment document. So kind of this sheet here that we have in Miro, where you then have a section for opportunity, solution, and then post-launch recap. And it asks you a couple of questions, like what exactly is the problem? How would you measure the success of solving this problem? Have you done some competitive research on this? And yeah, we found it super helpful to get started with an opportunity like that. And yeah, always note down everything we know already and make sure that we're all on the same page when diving into an opportunity assessment.
It's like a single source of truth for your opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because before we had like, I don't know, Google Docs and then something in Notion and something's in Figma. And now we started to really set up such a Miro page where we say, okay, this is the go-to place. And we also often come back when, you know, like this opportunity and solution phase, they often overlap. And the more you learn about the solution, then you have to change the opportunity. So yeah, this is kind of the single source of truth. And then we also use this kind of Miro board, as you can see, for everything else, for pasting in kind of the user research. In this case, we started out with an opportunity and realized was way too broad after doing user research, and then we set up a new one and kind of shrank it down a little bit. But yeah, I think these product alignment documents are an extremely helpful artifact for us. And yeah, and then maybe a third artifact. I think this is also something that probably a lot of product teams are working with. But for us, this has also proven very helpful. Is this, okay, you define an opportunity, then and say like, okay, this is what I want to focus on. Then you work on the opportunity, you work on the solution. At some point, if you haven't thrown it along the way into your trash can, but you're still kind of confident that it's the right thing, then you build it and you release it. And then we've set up these slides here where we say, okay, these are our live experiments that we have in the product. And we always list kind of the hypothesis, and then kind of down here, some of the metrics we're tracking in order to define, okay, are we already there? Are we achieving what we wanted to achieve, or do we still need to iterate? And yeah, at the moment it's still empty because we're still setting up our tracking in Amplitude. But yeah, I guess just thinking in the structured way of, okay, here on this document, you set up a couple of hypotheses, and then also after the release, you really kind of paste them here on these slides and really make sure you track and you're not just forgetting about this feature after you release it.
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for the thanks for this overview. It's really insightful also to get into the concrete aspects of how you guys work on a day-to-day basis. I'm just wondering, maybe this is the right time to bring in some of the questions we have here. So we've got somebody asking, we've got Johannes basically asking about how did you bring the engineering guys on board in terms of discovery, right? So how have you involved them in the discovery practice? And kind of like, you know, it's always this question of how do you get the input, but also this idea that jumping too quickly to the solution might be risky, right? So how do you manage that with the engineering team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's always difficult to define. I think in our case, we're very, very lucky because our head of engineering, he's super experienced and he's super interested in taking part in discovery work. So he is really part of this, we call it product trio. Also in our case, it's more like 4 people or sometimes even 5. So the product manager, the designer, or head of engineering, and myself, sometimes the founder, really, walking through this process where we look at opportunities, evaluate them, then go into the solution discovery process, tracking things. We're really involving him along all these steps. He's part of the daily meetings we're having to align on where are we at with different initiatives in terms of discovery. He's part of the WhatsApp group that we have with a couple of users where we get feedback. So he's really there along the whole way. And I think that is very helpful because that often leads to us changing also a way how we define a solution, because he says, oh, we could do it like that, or no, this is super difficult. So I think it's good to have him there from the very early stages. And I think then involving the rest of the engineering team, this is always a little tricky. I think at the beginning, we tried to involve them also in a lot of meetings and invited them to several ideation sessions. And then they complained that they didn't have enough time to write code. So now we kind of went back a little and said, okay, they don't need to be part of everything we do. What we're trying is that we're sending out a weekly message where we shortly summarize, hey, these are the different things we have in discovery. This is what we learned from users this week. This is why we kind of changed our focus a little bit or deprioritized something that we before thought was very important. So we try to keep them in the loop like that. And we also started doing something that we call intro sessions, where we say, fairly at the end. So we're already kind of working on the solution, but we haven't defined all the details. We're running a session where we're inviting all engineers and introduce it to them, and then they have the chance to also kind of give some advice on how to do something. That being said, there's also cases where our head of engineering is maybe not the right person to be there while we're still assessing an opportunity, but we need our machine learning engineer because he's really kind of the pro and he knows everything about this topic. And then we're still kind of bringing in individuals to certain discussions to make sure we're taking the right decisions. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful. I think there is not this one way of doing it right. I think in our case, it's also still this experimenting and you're probably oftentimes moving back and forth between involving them a lot, and then you figure out it's too much, then you reduce it a little bit, then you figure out you send around messages on Slack that no one is reading, so you rather turn this into a meeting where you introduce it. I think
it's great, right? Because you have options at least. Like you're in at a company size where things are still quite easy and swift to put in place or to change. So that's quite refreshing. I'm also going to pick up a couple of other questions here. So Madeline is asking about something you touched on earlier. So she is asking, in the pre-product phase, how did you find your testers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we were lucky because with our product, people really wanted to use it. It's also now, I think we don't have an acquisition problem. Whoever I tell about the product is like, oh my God, I want to use it.
I want a digital assistant. Thank you very much.
So this was mainly friends, but we tried to make sure that it's somehow diverse and that we brought in people that were parents, were in different life stages, tried to make sure we brought in some diversity in terms of age and origin, some expats, some Germans, some people who work in the tech industry, some people who don't. So we basically just reached out to our network, and then I think it was good because there was a lot of word of mouth that people were, oh, I heard about this. Can I also become a tester? So for us, this was fairly
That's a good
easy.
sign.
Yeah, that's true. But I think what in these cases, what I would always recommend is do it for free or for a very low price, so people don't have this hurdle of having to pay for it. Spread the word on LinkedIn, on all kind of networks you're part of. I think there's often many more people that want to try and help and are excited about being part of this early stage. So in one of my former jobs where I was working for a B2B company, we also we set up this lead user group where we wanted to make sure we have some companies to provide us feedback on a regular basis. And we thought like, okay, everyone is super busy in their job. Why should they spend an hour every week providing us feedback? But they were so excited to kind of be part of that. And if you give people this feeling of, hey, you can be a pioneer, you're part of this very early phase, then I'm always surprised how many people are offering to volunteer and try something out. And I think kind of the product community is also always a good group of people to reach out to. So a friend of mine is also just starting a company, and in their kind of early user group, they have a very also can't call it a product yet, it's more a prototype, and they just have a lot of product managers and designers in there because these are people who know that you depend on this feedback early on. So
pretty cool. So I'm going to pick this one and then we can move along. Got a question from Romain, who's saying, could you tell us more on how you measure value from a user's point of view? You presented the criteria, but how do you verify success or failure afterward?
That's a great question. Just today, we had a session where we were talking about what are our core KPIs that we should measure. Well, two thoughts on that. I think that the first thought is, I think in this very early stage, you should not focus too much on analytics, because you don't have a lot of users out there. It's much more valuable to make sure you're in constant touch with people, and you just get their opinion, and you just see, like, are people talking about it? Do they come into a feedback call and you see their eyes glowing and they're like, oh, I love it, and you know what, I referred it to a friend. I think then you see that you're adding value. So kind of focusing on qualitative research, making sure you set up some feedback channels with these early users, a weekly chat where you reach out to them and ask them for their input. I think at the beginning that's even more important than having great KPIs and analytics in place. But then kind of once you reach a stage, and we are now in the stage where we're currently looking into, okay, KPIs, we've set up all our tracking events and implemented amplitude. Then the way how very concretely we're measuring that is by seeing how many tasks are people handing in and how much time are we saving them, because we believe that this is in the end one of our core KPIs, the time we save people. We don't, and this is our engagement metric. Engagement in our case is not how much time you spend on the app, because we want to develop this tool that you don't have to spend a lot of time with.
Exactly, right, yeah.
That's, I think, in our case, an interesting thing. Engagement usually is like, how much time do people spend in your product? But in our case, it's like, hopefully they don't spend a lot of time in there. But the way how we would measure if they're still engaged or if there's still value is by how much time we save them. And then we also made sure that we implemented a feedback functionality in the app from day one, where they can basically, after everything we took up for them, can provide us feedback on a 1 to 5 star scale. Say like, yeah, this was great, this wasn't great. So we get this kind of rough indication of whether we're on the right track or not. And I think that the most difficult thing for us to measure right now, this is not user value, but more, can we build up a scalable system, is how do we measure if our operations team is becoming more efficient or not. So this is currently the tracking and analytics challenge where we're still trying to figure out what would be a good metric for this.
And to measure the time you're saving your end users, you're trying to, for instance, measure the time it takes for your team to perform those tasks, or?
Yeah, but this is also kind of a tricky thing. So at the moment, our proxy is how many tasks are we taking up per user, assuming that most of the time they hand in some bigger tasks, some smaller tasks, but on average they all have been a similar size. But yeah, and eventually the time we save would be more more accurate. But how to exactly do that is hard to tell, because in the end, if we become if we're taking up the same task for different users, we're much faster than a user would be. At the same time, we sometimes have to document things on the side, so it's hard. It's still kind of something that our operators would need to report, and that's never a good metric if it's kind of a self-reported one. So yeah, still playing around with that and looking at different options of how we could get this metric.
And maybe to go into more details of how do you plan your day-to-day discovery, and how does that combine with your daily work? Do you have workflows in place? How do you balance those two type of activities?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think it's always easy to get lost in delivery and not make up enough time for discovery. So we really try to make sure that it's at least a 50-50 ratio for our PMs and designers, but actually it should be even more the discovery time. I think the way how we enter that is that also our engineers kind of take up some maybe some tasks that usually are done by a PM, are writing part of the tickets themselves, for example. And our machine learning engineers at the moment, they're writing many of their tickets themselves, which saves our product manager a lot of time. And yes, this is something we just started a couple of weeks to make sure we also have some ceremonies in place to manage our day-to-day work here. We're currently running a typical delivery daily, and right afterwards we have a daily to go through all our discovery work. We have a task board in Jira where we're tracking, okay, what is currently going on in discovery. We have a weekly meeting where we get together to look at, okay, what is going on, what are kind of decisions we need to take, to look at the opportunity map and see is there anything that came in again. So these are the fixed slots, so once a week and every day. And then I think we have these standard meetings where we don't say, okay, we're doing that every Thursday, but it's more like ad hoc, where we say we really kick off each new opportunity by kind of getting together and looking at this product alignment document that I showed before. We are then kind of also following up, and usually kind of right after this daily check-in where we see where we're at, we're usually then diving into a prototype discussion and seeing like, okay, our designer was working on that, let's all get together and see if this prototype is going into the right direction. So these are the standard ceremonies we have. I think what we don't have yet, but what I would like to establish is standard sessions with our users where we interview them. I think at the moment we're lucky because we're definitely talking to users on a daily, if not on a weekly, if not daily base. But at some point, probably we need to find a way to set this up. So we always have it every Monday, a slot in the calendar where we make sure we talk to someone.
Right. So it's almost like replicating or creating new rituals that you have for delivery to discovery, so that it's part of it. Okay.
And just to follow up on that, and then I think in the delivery ceremonies, we're also talking a little bit about discovery, right? So in the sprint planning, we always say, okay, this is what's going on in the sprint. And by the way, this is what we or kind of those people that spend most of the time on discovery are planning to do this week. And in the retrospective, for example, we don't use it just to talk about delivery, but also to bring up things that are not working well or that are working well in discovery.
Yeah. And what would you say is the typical length of work you're conducting from identifying an opportunity that you want to maybe dig on or like explore, discover, up to the time where that opportunity would be clear enough so that you can maybe pass it on to the delivery part?
That's a great question. I think I don't have a good answer to that because I think at the moment that really depends. We sometimes have these big topics. For example, one of the things we're currently working on, I think we went into that not knowing enough. We went into the solution definition too early. Now we basically went completely back, shrank it down. So it was this iterating, going back and forth, not very linear process. And I think that unfortunately happens often in discovery, but this is also why I think discovery is so valuable, because if you wouldn't do it, then you would just kind of build something and then realize too late that it's the wrong thing you built. But I think we're not yet good enough in also time boxing our discovery. I just recently talked to a friend and he was like, you know what, we say like, okay, now we've understood the opportunity, we go in the solution phase, but we say, okay, in 2 weeks, we want to have kind of something ready that we can start building. And it's then maybe not the fully fledged solution, but it's kind of at least one first iteration. So we're not, we're not kind of going too many loops, trying out too many things. I think that can easily happen. So this is something that I also wanted to bring back to our team to make sure at some point we time box and say, okay, we, of course, you can always spend more time on this and that, but sometimes creativity, I think, also comes from being restricted, and being time restricted is a good means to become more creative.
Yeah, definitely.
Super interesting. I'm just sorry. Now I'm just jumping in because with 5 minutes, we've got 5 minutes until the end of the show. I just want to check whether some of the people that are online watching us right now want to drop some questions in the chat window for Sophia, and then I'm going to hand back to you, Selene, and then I think I'll have a wrap-up question, and then we'll come to a close.
Great, let's do that. So in the meantime, if someone has a question, in the meantime, I just wanted to ask, actually in the article that you wrote on Medium, I think it's super interesting that you explain that from what you see and from your experience, you have product teams whose performance is actually measured through their speed and the time they take to deliver features, rather than their work on discovery. And I'm interested to know, like, first, why you think that is, and also, second, how would you see discovery value being measured as a key performance indicator of product team performance, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this, like, how do you measure the value of discovery? I think in the end, you want to make sure that you reach the outcomes you define. And if you're not reaching the outcomes, then it's either because you do poor discovery work or you're not doing enough. And I think in most of the cases, you're simply not doing enough. At least that's my experience. And then if you see, okay, you want to reach these and these targets, and then you have certain initiative and you believe doing them will help you reach these outcomes, and then you don't, then I would always kind of go back and kind of ask the team, do you think we have this 50-50 or even 70-30 ratio of where this kind of discovery trio is spending their time on? And if not, how can we maybe get rid of some of the barriers here to make more time for it? So I think in the end, discovery is defined by the outcomes and what you achieve with the product. And your first question was like, why are teams still so often measured just by the speed of their delivery and not really based on their discovery work? I think this comes because there was this old model where you had someone from the business side defining what to build, and then you had this product design engineering team just building it. And then it was super easy to just say, like, okay, your success is how fast, and then can you build this in this and that quality? And that was an easy measure. And I think now we're moving to these empowered product teams where you, as kind of this business person, just say, we want to reach this business metric. Go and figure out how to do that. And then you need to have a lot of trust in these teams that they do it right. And I think this chicken and egg problem, if you've never seen this working, you're coming from this old model somehow, then it's hard to kind of build up this trust, but you will only build it up if you see how it works. So I think it's about these kind of teams to make sure that they show that the way how they work in this kind of more modern way, where you bring together discovery and delivery works, and you show that you can reach these outcomes. And then hopefully you will gain the trust, and you will rather be measured by the outcomes than by the speed of your delivery work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about showing by example, right? I think that's really interesting. Yeah. I'm conscious of time. I'll just give an opportunity to people who are watching right now to drop a question if they have one. In the meantime, Sophia, we wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today. It sounds really interesting what you guys are trying to do at Saiga. Really looking forward to some success there. If people want to reach out to you, they can do so through LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, would happy to listen from some people what they thought and to continue discussion on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Sulen, thank you so much again, as usual, for co-hosting with me. And yeah, good luck with everything, Sophia. And yeah, hope we get to speak to you soon.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so much.
Sophia.
Yeah, thanks, Celine. Thanks, Axel. That was great.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.